Hi guys, Dane here, and today I'm going to attempt to do a review of From a Buick 8 by Stephen King. I say I'm going to attempt it. I got about a third of the way through and then I had to actually put this down to read the Young Writer of the Year Award shortlist, which has been featured in my last few videos and my last few reviews. So I picked it back up, and originally I wasn't going to do a video review because I thought it doesn't seem right to give it a video review when I have had that, that 2-3 week gap in the middle of it. But actually I picked it back up and I just got sucked straight back in. I'm not gonna lie, this isn't a perfect book, but I'd like to explore just a few of the different bits that I thought about it while I was reading it. So, first off, what's this about? Okay, so as you can imagine from the title, it's about a Buick 8. Now, I'm from the UK, so I don't really know what a Buick looks like, much less a Buick 8. I guess it looks a little bit like this, except in the afterword, King actually said it's the wrong model, so we're looking at the wrong model of a Buick here. But you kind of get the idea of the kind of car it is. And this story, it follows what happens when the Pennsylvania State Troopers find themselves in the possession of this Buick 8, except it's not just a normal car. It kind of came around in some unusual circumstances, and I can explain all this without... So basically, this Buick 8 came about through some weird circumstances. It was actually driven up to a petrol station. The driver got out and asked the attendant to gas up the car for him. And then he said, the oil's fine. And then he nipped round the back of the petrol station to go to the toilet and then was never seen again. The petrol station attendant is looking around, trying to figure out where the driver's gone. And he starts to notice this car's a very unusual car. So he calls the Pennsylvania State Police. They come along and they pick it up, they take it back to base. And they basically impound it in something called Lot 2, which is one of their car lots. Now, after this point is when it all starts to get very strange. What I did want to say before I carry on further is there is an afterword in this book, and King explains where the story came about. And basically, he was driving home. His wife Tabitha had taken the plane, and he was driving home across state, across America, and he'd got his car full of his writing bits and bobs and all this. And he parked up, asked somebody to gas it up, and then he went down towards this riverbank to take a leak, as it goes, I think. And he almost slipped in. And in that moment he thought, well, what would have happened if I'd slipped in and been washed away and I'd never been found? And then that's how this comes about. And what's different, I guess, about From a Buick 8 is that it is kind of, it's like a haunted house story, except it's about a haunted car. It's about this haunted Buick. So King himself, obviously most of his books are set in Maine. In this particular one, he does set it in Pennsylvania because that was where he was actually when the incident that inspired him to write it took place. And so because of that, he had to do a lot of research work with the Pennsylvania State Police. But one of the things in this book, and he does it in other books of his where he writes about policemen, Stephen King can write a good policeman because he can see the way that they think, and he can kind of follow that procedural element without it becoming a police procedural. I mean, this is very much like a supernatural horror almost. Let me just read this part of the blurb. Come close, children, and see the living crocodile. A vintage 54 blue Buick Roadmaster. At least that's what it looks like. It's not Shed 2, it's Shed B. Sorry, I got that bit wrong. Basically, the story follows a young lad called Ned Wilcox, and he's joined the state police. His father was a policeman, and he got killed in a hit and run by a drunk driver. So Ned's dad was the police chief. He got killed in this hit and run, and Ned goes along to the police station and volunteers to act. He works on dispatch basically with a woman named Shirley, and so it's obviously his job when someone calls the local police. He sends out the cars, he manages where people are, and while he's there he starts to learn more and more about his dad and about this secret about the Buick in Shed B. So obviously his dad was kind of instrumental in actually putting this car back there and all the events that followed around that. And all the people that he's now working with all remember what happened, and it's 20 odd years ago. And one of the things that struck me about this book is that actually it takes place over a very, very long period of time, but all of the action is very much, because it's being told through the memories of these people, they don't bother talking about the 3 years when nothing happened. So actually, although for the characters, the Buick in Shed B was kind of boring after a while, they compared it to a loaded shotgun on a shelf in that, yeah, you've got to be careful around it, but as long as you don't go and mess with it, it's fine. It's dangerous and it's there, but if you don't touch it, it's fine. But what does happen is every now and then there are these kind of lightning flashes from Shed B and the temperature drops and things start to come out of the car. Now with the aliens that come out of this car, I say aliens, they're not really aliens, they're just things from another world. It's a bit like if you've seen Stranger Things and things coming through from the upside down, the boot of this Buick is a portal to the upside down. It's really cool how it's done because it's very true to life, and that the cops, they band together and they know that something weird's going on and they can't write reports about it, so they have their own codes on the radio. I can't remember off the top of my head what the code is, but they'll radio in code 46, and that means that things are happening in the Buick. Usually when things are happening in there, they've got a thermometer in there and the thermometer drops and then things start going wrong, very badly wrong. And you get the sense that the evil is kind of coming from this Buick, but actually the cops almost don't know. There's one character in it which was, I think, kind of summed up the attitude that Stephen has in this. Stephen? I call him, he's Stephen now. My old pal Stephen. My mate Stephen, when he was writing this book, he summed it up in terms of there's this one character and one of the cops knows him from when they were kids. And this guy's grown up, he's an undesirable, he's beating his girlfriend up, he's got swastikas tattooed on his neck, and they arrest him for potentially being under the influence, and things happen. I won't go too much into it. Forgot where this was going. And the book itself, it passes between different viewpoints of the different cops. And one of the cops who helped bring this guy in, it's the cop who knew this kid when he was back in school. And he kind of talks about reflecting upon the past and how they had one guy, a drunk guy in the back of the cop car, and he'd tied up his shirt into like an icing funnel kind of thing, cracked in his shirt, and he was writing his name on the windows of the cop car. And then the cop said, "Why did you do it?" And because he was a drunk, he was just like, "Bad things happen in the world." And that was his response for why he did it. And I think it's kind of explored that the police don't know whether they're doing the best they can in a situation, and they've got this Buick, and again, because they can't write reports about it, they've got a petty cash tin, they all put some money in it, so if something does go wrong, if the Buick does some damage or whatever, then they can reimburse it from the petty cash tin without having to make it official and on the record. And at one point, these creatures come through from the other side and they kill them, and then one of the cops is like, but he was kind of confused, and he was like, there was no question about it being innocent or guilty, it was that it was alien and it would have killed us, but we killed it, and we killed it because it's alien, and therefore are the police, who are serving the job of, you know, to protect and to serve, are they any different to these weird creatures coming through from the other side? Okay, so I actually wrote down some notes about this book as well. One of the things I did think was that there was a lot of action, but it was also repetitive. So again, it's impressive that there's a lot of action because it did take place over 20 years, pretty much, the story took place. But at the same time, it's very much nothing happened, and then there was a thunderstorm and something came out of the car, and then we dealt with it, and then nothing happened, and then there was a thunderstorm and something came out of the car. It's very formulaic almost in that sense. You won't get something that blows your mind in the way that you might be used to from Stephen King. There's a dog in it called Mr. Dillon. Bad things happen to dogs in Stephen King books. I don't know if you've ever read Cujo. It's Cujo Mark II, basically. So again, there's this sense that this Buick, and there's this evil coming out of the Buick, and maybe it's not directly influencing events, but maybe it is. And so, for example, there's a big crash and a big fire, and there's a lorry and a school bus all involved, and all these petrol fumes come out. And obviously at the time, the cops don't know what these fumes are. They just know that there are these big gaseous fumes coming out and people are coughing. And one of the cops goes and he rescues these school kids who are there during summer doing like a pottery class. And so the cop breaks into a school bus, gets all the kids on side, and drives away from it. And as they're driving away, the kids are all singing "Row, row, row your boat," which I just think was a great little detail, and it really brought the thing alive. And I guess this is a bit of a spoiler again. It's hard to review a book without doing spoilers, but it was touching, that moment. Yeah, one thing I would like to say before I get onto the rating, I actually got this book from a bin. So where I used to work in Marlow, I worked next to a charity shop, and they had a recycling bin, and basically they used to throw all these books out and they got pulped. And to be fair, they got a small amount per ton of books or whatever, so this might have got them 20p or 30 cents in American dollars, but they chucked it in the bin. So I took it out because it's stunning. I mean, it's hardback, and yeah, so this was a free book. And look at that. I mean, I really like the colour of it as well. Lovely, lovely stuff. So that's pretty much all I have to say about From a Buick 8. Like I say, I don't want to give too much of it away. If you've read some Stephen King before, you'll be very much kind of used to his way of telling stories, I suppose. And it is quite a typical Stephen King book. It was written between, I think, 1999 and 2002. So it's, in context, it's one of his later books after all of his big bestsellers that kind of define genres and stuff. It is still a good read though. I mean, I haven't found really a Stephen King book that I didn't like. Actually, the first Stephen King book that I read was The Shining, and it put me off him a little bit. I didn't enjoy it much. And since then, I think I've got much more into him. I'm not going to lie and say this is the most incredible book in the world. I am going to try and put the jacket back on. But I do think this is worth reading for a horror fan. It's not worth going out of your way for. It's worth reading if you want to read every Stephen King novel. If you want to begin with Stephen King, don't read this. There are plenty of other Stephen King books out there that will just blow your mind. This is still good. For anybody else, it would probably be one of the best books in their set of releases, but for Stephen King, does it stand out? I'll remember the vague story, I won't remember the characters. So it's time to give it a rating. No beating around the bush. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. It's a good read. It also flew past pretty quickly. I thought it was going to take a lot longer to read than it did. Kind of flew right through it. It was good. It wasn't great. So there we have it. That's what I thought of From a Buick 8 by Stephen King. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've read From a Buick 8 and what you thought, and if not, if you've read any Stephen King, what you thought of that, what your favourite Stephen King book is. Whatever, just talk to me about books, because I like talking about books. Thanks a lot for watching again, and I will see you soon. Bye.